Herkese merhaba. Kontrakt yayınına hoş geldiniz. Şöyle el sallıyorum.
Merhabalar.
Farklı medyaları denemeye devam ediyoruz. Yelta Kön ve Berkan Cenkler ile. Bugün İsveç'ten konuklarımız var. Onlar birazdan kendilerini tanıtacaklar. Ama programa bugün tabii ki konuklarımızla bir paylaşım bulunduğu için İngilizce yapıyor olacağız. So, welcome all. Thank you for being here. And I hope you enjoy your stay in Istanbul. And maybe we can start like this. You can introduce yourself and your aim to be here and the projects maybe, and then we can go on with questions and so on. Yesterday we were in this seminar, let's say Utopia here now. So it was a quite interesting thing for me, at least, to be a part of that group and guests, of course, Gökhan Karakuş and Meriç Öner. And what do you do? Why you are here? And who are you?
I'm Ramia Maze. I'm a background in architecture and design, and I do both research and teaching in Stockholm, in KONTRAAKT University College of Arts, Crafts and Design, and also at the Royal Institute of Technology. Maybe that's enough to start. We can talk about the project after.
My name is Maike Schalk, and I also have a background in architecture. I work mostly with my own projects in public art-related projects that deal with questions of participation. I'm also a researcher and teacher at the same department as Ramia is.
At the school
of Architecture, Royal Institute of Technology.
And my name is Magnus Eriksson, and I'm a Stockholm-based curator and project organizer. And I've been working as a curator at the Swedish Museum of Architecture for quite some time. Before that, I was working at the JASPIS, which is a Swedish governmental exchange program for artists and designers and architects. And that actually brought me here to Istanbul maybe 5-6 years ago, where I kind of established quite a lot of contacts. And we were also collaborating at that time with Platform Guarantee.
So all the work actually that you are doing has some kind of relation, that you trio, and there are also a collaborational projects that you make together. For example, I know the Design Act book, which is like a quite motivational thing for me. I saw the book. I searched through if it is in Istanbul, and then found it in the library. And just spent one day just by going through all the material. So tell us about the book, the work you do, and for example the participation projects, or maybe I don't know. Maybe we can also gradually get into the topic, like not the comparison in between, of course, Stockholm and Istanbul, but at least the design environment, ideas about the future, of course, because yesterday's talk was also interesting because of that for me, because the idea Utopia for me is not something in the future, but it's something related to now. So how do you describe it, and what is your expression?
So we're here actually in Istanbul this time together with the project Utopia Now Here, which is a project we sort of initiated in the spring, kind of collecting together practitioners in architecture, design, and curation, you could say, and also historiography and art, who started to talk together. We know each other in different constellations. We work with perhaps similar trajectories, but we wanted a chance to speak together more. So we took the topic, kind of Utopia here, now here, as sort of as a chance to collectivize. And we applied at that point both for a bit of research funding, but also to come to the biennial. And that was both because of the theme manifesto, you can say, but also because of our interest in Istanbul also. I mean, Magnus has contacts for quite some time, various colleagues that we have who have been engaged here in different ways, several relations through also the Design Act project that I guess Magnus would great to hear about that. And so we really took the chance to sort of build up the project in a startup phase by coming here and by actually being together concretely in the same environment to start talking with one another and relating together across our projects, but also to start having a dialogue with local practitioners, maybe dealing with similar issues, and then trying to almost define our relations from the bottom up, you can say. So not starting with literature, not starting with, but to sort of start by dialogue. And we've actually been incredibly impressed. I've had a great sort of series of dialogues. We can speak more about that. But so we're here in Istanbul now because of this bit of research funding, also in collaboration with the Swedish consulate, which is based here in Istanbul, and we're part of the parallel event program of the biennial. And so we've been having a series of dialogues as part of that parallel event program through which you've met you. And also the presentation yesterday, which was both we starting to sort of formulate our approach to utopics and inviting three, as you said, yourself, Gurkan and Meric.
And this is, you have a website, right?
Yes.
So
utopianowhere.org.
Yeah, and because you mentioned yesterday, everything, all the dialogues will be anyhow documented and shared there. So it is not only a series of meetings, but at the same time it's in a way digital platform that you are going to share all those experiences that you collectively created with through these meetings. Also.
Exactly. So we'll have some sort of description or account of what we've been doing. Also our previous projects, which we can maybe say something about as well. But what we've been doing here will be collected a bit on the website. We aim for a publication as well. And it's not clear if that will be digital or printed or what the appropriate format is. And perhaps also some kind of happening or event or exhibition in which we could sort of work with this exchange in a dialogic way, I think also. So we aim for that. So this is the start of the project. We hope to sort of build it up, check the website for ongoing updates.
That's great. That's great. So maybe you may also wanted to say something about your, for example, personal work, their relation to the idea of utopia, maybe, from their own point of view, because I love to discuss rather than, talking about some kind of theoretical thing we may share maybe, or context of utopia and or daily actions about it, or how you capture, for example, the idea of utopia, because is it some kind of project, is scientific or let's say science fictional projection of cityscape, or your idea of utopia is an organizational new team, so we can discuss about that.
I don't know, maybe shall I? Just to add what Rami already said, we previously have been quite interested in different utopian practices, you could say. On the one hand, maybe the modernist approach, we talked also yesterday about it, where you have this generalist idea that everything should be available to everybody, which of course is an utopia, very idealistic one. We have never come very closer, but at least we had a philosophy and ideology in this direction, which we may have given up a long time. And for many people, of course, many people see there an advantage, other people see there a problem, but there are also other attempts or other ideas about utopia which are more focusing on micro practices, not to wait for the big revolution or the big political shift which would then bring justice to everyone, but that you already start here and now to develop utopian practices or utopic practices. And I think we have been discussing around that quite.
We've sort of formulated already some approaches, a little bit informed by literature, but also that we relate to. We've spoken about a kind of fictocriticism, for example, like the idea of fictions as a mode of criticizing or distancing yourself from the normal times and spaces. And perhaps that's a kind of modernist, it could also relate to the kind of speculative or critical design that you have up here, like really creating fictional settings which imagine a radical difference. But we also relate very strongly to the notion of embodied utopias, which comes from some of the feminist practices, you can say, which is really about not just projecting, elsewhere, but living it out, trying it every day, relating to other people on the basis of a different way of thinking, or a different way of living, or a different way of doing architecture, or a different way of organizing discourse, you could say. So there are these different kinds of, different genres, you could say, of utopic practice, which have been sort of theorized, but also that we feel strongly related to, perhaps, in our creative practice.
This is, when you state in this way, it's much more, I don't know, interesting for me, because most of the time, you think that if people are talking about some kind of utopia, people generally understand that, okay, this is something which not be realized, etc., etc. But you're talking about, utopias that people actually live or create now, and using design as a critical tool, or a tool to investigate something, to reach to that utopia, or to use design as a communication tool, maybe, to explain people, or organizational tools. Quite an interesting idea, because, as I mentioned, when we talk about, most of the time when we talk about utopias, people understand that, okay, the Sun City of Campanella, or, Thomas More's thing. So it is, some kind of imaginary scape, where dreams are shared, etc.
I think that's the most problematic thing of utopia, because the common understanding is like, utopias are always sterile, always it's a transcendent illusion, and it's so. I think it's so problematic, because an utopia should provide the people to think about it, or to act.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's like a tale stories. It's also good to dream, but
of course,
in terms of
that's why yesterday, the talk of yesterday was quite interesting, because while you are talking about utopias, actually you are talking about now, and the title of it,
that's
it's also directly says it, a different kind of retitle process of the whole idea of utopia.
of course, that's
We
the
have,
value of the.
Just to add something to that, we have been interested in 3 different kinds of utopian practice. One was this really large political, ideological idea. The other one was the micro resistance practices, where you could probably also look at design practice and architecture practices, like Atelier d'Architecture de Gérer, for example, and many others. I'm sure that you have many practices in Istanbul here too, but then we were also interested in looking at the so-called lived utopias, which we called like that, and there we were also particularly interested in like feminist practices, because we think here you might find this urge to reshape a society which might structurally function completely differently. And there you have this kind of queer feminist women camps, for example, which is this kind of 6 or 7 weeks a year. You meet somewhere else in another place, in nowhere, so to say, where you sort of live your utopian desires, and then you return to a normal life, or work, let's say, certain housing projects where people share everything, sort of, where they try to live basically a different society in a nutshell, in a very small size. And these people, they are not designers necessarily, they have another urge or drive, but you find these, if you look around, you can find these utopian practices everywhere, in one way or another, I think, and can be interesting.
It relates to a lot of sort of social movements, you could say, or socio-political movements, alternative economies, sharing economies, solidarity economies, ecologies of these kind of practices, these different ways of understanding how society is organized on a micro scale. So there are, of course, macro nationalistic notions of politics. There's also a different sort of radical rethinking, you could say, of the everyday life, how we relate to our children, to our parents, to the multi-generations, to to the different sorts of interdependencies that we must have. So it's and then of course then you think within that, well, what does the architecture practice do, or what does the handicraft practices do, or what does the knowledge of the craftsman bring that is not the, what does the university bring? So you can sort of rethink societal relations in a different way, you can say.
That's creation of that creation of a platform, that you are busy with, and also I know that you are dealing with this archive projects. You go back in time and collect people, collect experiences through these ideas, etc. Quite important, because most of the time, again, you cannot, even can give a little information about this alternative everyday life practices, organizational schemes for the society, etc. Most of the time, if you talk about this kind of alternatives, people say that okay, you are just imagining so much. It's impossible, to make it in this society, in this economical, structure, etc. But there are alternatives. There are people who are living it. There are people who are organizing it. There are people who are, deconstructing it and reconstructing it, etc. So, this is also what we like, for example, here in Turkey, because there are lots of different types of practices in these kind of a really wide range of fields.
Yeah.
Could you, are there examples of what you think, like these micro-societal radical ways of living?
Actually, it happened for 6 days in Kids Park.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it was like the most popular, let's say most popular, visible moment. At least people just showed that kind of desire to live in a different way, with different kind of everyday motivations, because there are actually traditional aspects of traditional everyday habits, like sharing, helping to each other to build something, or provide some kind of need, etc. So it was like incredible dense moment where you can, but maybe we as children who grew up in a city environment revisit the ideas of sharing, creating space together, or that kind of stuff. This is one of the most unstructured, unorganized experience in a way. But then also there are small towns, for example, and politicians, let's say mayors and elected people who are trying to create alternative economical environment for producers, etc. For example, this is also quite an interesting thing, because for example, there is this town called Seferihisar. The mayor of Seferihisar will be also our guest here. So they are trying to organize Mandarin producers. They create corporations, legal-based corporations. The municipality buy a factory of packaging, for example, and then hand in to the producers. So they let them do all the trade, production, business by themselves, etc. So it's again not, of course, a unique utopian idea, but some kind of alternative organizational team in terms of economy and the market, because most of the time, you provide there some kind of company to deal with it, etc., etc. But they said that no, the producers will be related to that, and that kind of related stuff. So ideas to create some kind of I don't know, a society with different type of qualities, let's say, or future projections in construction, not only in Seferihisar, but there are some other little towns, for example, and this is in a level of elected, elections, through the elections, and that kind of organization. But there is also practices like architecture for all, the practice that we are in, and of course there are various different types of practices, not only related with design, but there are associations, for example, who are trying to organize, for example, women in the eastern part of Turkey, to provide them some kind of economical independency by teaching them local organic, let's say, environmental production methods related to any kind of farming. Bees, honey, and what is there the good. And then out of that organization, for example, right now they're trying to introduce some kind of small shop for them. So there are lots of this, collectives, and also some of them are independent, some of them has funding from corporations even.
Wow.
So even though you think that okay, there is nothing much is going on in the country, actually there is this nodes which are like working really hard, but most of the time you are not aware of it because there is no that kind of platform which collects all the information. There is no archive that you can go through and check out. It's most important.
Yeah, it's the most important because without archive or without documentation, it will be all romanticizing.
Yes.
To the to that life.
Yeah.
For example, I think if I'm talking about the Gezi protest and the Gezi experience, now after that, now we're all romanticizing it. We don't archive. We didn't archive. We didn't document well. And that's why we didn't get any real life outcomes.
I think.
Because if you are going to document it, you will have a critical point of view.
You can revisit that, precious and really short period of time.
Because you've been involved in the project here in the biennial about the Gezi documentation in a way. Can I ask you?
Yeah, of course. It's reversed.
It's the poster up there, and I would really like to know: is it designed as a poster, or how is it distributed? Who is it for? I mean, you've had so much experience on the ground, and then how did this come out of that, and who? And where does it go?
It started with the speaker's point. Cenk, and they were all already in the park, and they made a speaker's point in front of police barricades. And then we put the video and the pictures from this installation on the Facebook. We have one friend, professor, Said Ali Kökner, and he wrote to us, document them. You should document all of them. And then we realized, okay, it's a time. There's an architecture without architects, and it's a
architecture without architects.
Because people are doing their own architecture, or it is kind of emergent situations.
Because when for example we were thinking about people as architects, people might need this and that, etc. And next day when we go there to, for example, try to build something, we realize that they already
because the Taşkışla or faculty is so close to the park and architecture from the university, and we were in the faculty talking about what can we do right now. Then
we go to the park and see they've already done it, etc. So
there's no need for it.
Or when they call okay, we need a library in the park. Can you help us as an architecture for all? And then we saw on the internet, it's already done.
Because most of at that kind of emergent moment when people need things, actually, they do it. Actually, we do it. Because we are the people in that sense. Because we are not waiting for somebody to design it, build it, etc., etc. If you need it at that moment, then you do it. Sometimes, as people that we are living in big towns, we most of the time forget this kind of practices, or we forget our contribution to the city. Luckily, for example, Istanbul is in a way, open, huge, living, construction area, living creatures. So the service from the municipality or from the government is not that much well organized and widespread. So people, definitely luckily. because against that strategies, people still uses their tactical contribution to their own environment, to their own built environment. So they go there, they plant some vegetables, or they build structures, whatever they need, etc. And then at that moment, as architects, we thought that, and of course, we pushed by a friend, again, a professor of ours, and then we realized that yes, if there is no need for a designer to build something or to design something, maybe our contribution to this action, what is going on in the park, can be the documentation of everything, because when the time comes and when people evacuate the park, and then when the situation changes, these structures won't be there for sure. It won't remain there. So to re-examine them without having drawings, detailed photographs, etc., will be impossible. And of course, now especially we do have that really short-term visual memory, because there are so many images around, and media is so strong, etc., the reality or the idea of history, as always, can be reshaped so easily. So unless you have that kind of documentation, then you can re-examine it, not restructuring them, not for restructuring them, not again to build them, but to understand what was the motivation, what might be the the tools people used, etc., and what kind of environment was that, why people needed to have a hospital kind of space under a tent, why people needed to have a library in the park, in the public park, why people needed to have a speaker's corner, what kind of needs that reflects,
and also the illustration method is like the tracing from the pictures, but it's under moment the draftsman, or what when we're drawing, when we're tracing them, we choose some details. We are not going to draw everything, but we choose some details, and it creates another representation, and it's create another commentary about the image.
So also, commentary. Okay.
And also it's kind of because the people who contributed to that work, actually, all of them are not from the association, but there is also, we made an open call. So people who is motivated to be a part of that, they just, draw it. So, for example, what Yata said is his point of view while drawing it and reducing maybe something, or, stressing it something up. And at the same time, for me, it was like, because, I was drawing a cat, for example, and it was quite interesting because, there were so many details. And, you think that, okay, what is this, what is that? It's a brick, and then what is this metal structure? How people would move that from there to there, etc., and why? Exactly. So it's again some kind of re-examination process, the true drawing. So again, actually, an architectural practice.
Absolutely.
You use that architectural practice of drawing as a tool of researching, in a way, and representation, of course. Those kind of stuff. We thought about it afterwards. Because
we thought about that. For example, we don't want to represent them as an artwork.
Yes. Okay.
Right. But it was also big discussion in between. To give it as a part of the biennial, because it never meant to be a part of a object or or exhibition object or something like that. But it's like a commentary document about a specific period of time,
and it's not printed on a artistic paper or something like that. It's printed on a the ordinary vinyl. And the zine doesn't have any staples. It will be distributed to everyone.
Because if you get that much picky, or if you start to design, that work, then it loses its own, you know, ideas, let's say, idealistic, I don't know, messages from it.
Yeah, I think that's also when you, I mean, from my point of view as a curator, sometimes when you are trying to facilitate the space for highlighting something as well, it's very important not to kind of take over, to kind of make this into some kind of arty representation of something, but more facilitate the discussion maybe. And I think maybe that's the what I bring into to this as well, to somehow facilitate the space to both discuss but highlight, and also maybe somehow elevate those kind of practices that are not maybe recognized. Which I mean that could also be a question back where these spaces are happening here. I mean, it's obviously perhaps a cultural institution's role to facilitate that space, but
yeah, I think it's also another point, you know, because there are a lot of difficulties to, for the curator, I think you have much more difficulties to represent this kind of social political creative movements. I don't want to say artistic. It's also very interesting, I think, because we have still this discussion after all this placing. The idea is always on our mind, you know. Okay, it will be okay or not. It's,
yeah. But I think that was maybe, I mean, one of the attempts really with this Design Act project, because I mean it was created within, and this was a project that Rami and I was doing together for this governmental institution, very official in a way, but it was also, I mean, it was clearly targeted towards practitioners, something to use for practitioners, so it wasn't really a public thing in that sense, although everything was kind of public and the book is distributed like this, but it was clearly an attempt to kind of create a platform for exchange of ideas and knowledge and experience and so forth, and maybe that's not so easy sometimes for cultural institutions to do this, because there's always a pressure to be very public and to explain things very clearly or so. So, and I guess that's a challenge for cultural institutions and curators to somehow facilitate that, which could be only kind of connecting people really.
So
also we have a guest now.
Yeah, my topic is now with us in this chat room. So again, this is an experiment that we are, you know, trying to experience here now. So we have. Oh, he's out.
But he was there on the
He was there.
Maybe he will have a question or something. That's why
Yeah, maybe that's why he was online. And yeah, you know, this is the thing that we are trying to do. Right?
But I think this question that you kind of pointed at was maybe something that also something we can think about or struggle with. This notion of, do we do this kind of documentation or collection or archival process as a history reportage? Do we do it as a kind of research through which you discover new things, you can say? I mean, like you really go, I mean, so I discovered these things for myself. Maybe the reportage is more about showing the things in an accurate way that other people do. Whereas a research is finding things that connect, that go across. It's not about one thing, but about many things, you can say. And perhaps has a more point of view. Like this is my point of view as I read this, and I make the selection of this detail and this detail, which might differentiate an architectural research from a sociological research. You're interested in the joints and the movement and the, you know, it's a different kind of research question you would have than someone else, you could say. But then we were also speaking about the kind of objective aspect of maybe Utopia here now. In the book, also Design Act, we put these chapters as questions with a verb form, even though they were telling about other practices. We wanted to say they were active and maybe activating, but we also didn't want to make a recipe book or a handbook or guidelines, which is super popular now in social design. How to.
Yeah, how to.
Which is also like both a paralyzing thing and a prescriptive thing.
That's true.
So, but then how to think about the projective. I mean, if we were to think about the projective aspect of what it is that we do. I mean, of course, it's always projective to highlight and raise up That is a kind of politics of doing that, and it creates another possible future because you raise these things instead of these things. But then the question is, okay, to what extent do we want to make something new together? Or to what extent do we want to make something new that activates other people, you could say? And that's something we don't know, but I think these might be three kind of interesting. When we do this collection, this kind of research, this kind of archiving, this kind of, do we do it to more accurately document and raise up certain practices? Do we do it for our own understanding of what architecture does or what design does? Or do we do it for actually understanding a situation to ourselves or to activate, you could say, activism, something entirely new, and so on.
I think it could be, I think it could be possible to do all the things, but somehow in parallel with quite open connections. In a way, I think that's an interesting way of doing it. So you can maybe also from your own point of view enter into this project in the way that is relevant to you.
That kind of multiplicity in the practice, it's also quite crucial for novices, because normally the definition of architect is in terms of regular market-based definitions. It's like a as I mentioned yesterday, there is this client, there is this needs, there's this budget, and you deal with it, and there are also pre-defined outcomes like how much profit the investor need, etc., etc. But if we start to talk about new definition of architectures and new roles for architects, then for example, everything that you mentioned, might be a new role, not a lifetime role, but then with every situation, you may also define yourself some kind of other goal to create, like for example, in this drawing project, for example, every architect or every people who are involved in that project, they do have different type of qualities in their mind while they're even though they are not architects, maybe they were drawing it, for example. They were producing some kind of architectural element, a document. They were using an architectural method, let's say, to examine it, to reproject the existing thing, etc. And then that widens the discussion of the role of architects and the architecture, etc. So it's quite interesting.
And I think that has really been one of the points of the design act thing, to really kind of discuss and also discuss possible new roles, expanded roles for designers and architects and artists.
Micah, now it suddenly triggered in my mind, architecture in effect has its tracks, which I thought were actually quite nicely named, right? Critical historiography, or no, critical projections.
Critical projections, critical historiography, and the architect information, also how is the architect produced, and material conditions. And architecture, in effect, is a research, a strong research environment within our university, so it funds research, and our project is one of the projects within that strong research environment.
Because that could also be interesting to think about what are in the chapter that we sort of formulated in the design book, we came up with this sort of verb-based, question-based tactics, you could say. But those, how to frame those becomes very important, because that's what you take with you. And that's what goes across several projects. So it's not just one person or one project, but it sort of creates a frame that can be expanded, and in the same way that the architect, those categories, and then they relate to specific practices. In the architecture in effect, architecture has its very specific ways of doing research. Historiographical research, which is different than a theoretical research, which might be different than a material research, which might be different than a practical. So, those formulations are maybe more traditional, you can say, but also quite strong. Whereas in the design book, we tried to think across practices towards tactics and try to demystify notions like participation, which everyone uses. You can say, if you take participation, you look across historiography, across materials, across practice, across projective. then how, so then you take a theme-based, perhaps, approach across different disciplinary categories.
Talking about this
Yeah,
kind
this
of
is very
themes,
esoteric, but.
no, but it is quite important because, again, that kind of institutional point of view, it might be narrow the discussions, but at the same time, when you frame it, and then you have some kind of starting point to, to open it up a bit. Because, when you talk about participation, for example, the word participation is a big thing. Everybody is talking about participation. Even
It's a magic word.
right now, especially, and like ecological or green buildings, let's say. Sustainability. It turns into that kind of thing.
Meaningless. It's so everywhere.
In a way, fashionable, used by big investment companies. At the same time, I don't know, small production, small product producers, etc. Everybody is talking about that. This is the trap actually most of the time that we faced, because if you talk about this kind of issues only a theoretical in the theoretical context, then you can talk until the eternity, right? You can mention this, you can mention that, you can mention the research and this and that, but for me, especially the let's say the zeitgeist or the the spirit of the moment is mostly about doing something while discussing it, and after that it becomes real from my point of view. Because like creativity, for example, you cannot talk about participation from my point of view, of course, in a theoretical way, because you can try to recapture some aspects of participation, etc. But unless there is some kind of action that you are at that moment busy, then it's like a vague, amorphous, discussion which can go anywhere else. So then you lose your focus.
Maybe in that sense, participation is not the most interesting term to use, even though it can come in when you speak about it. But in that respect, I find those categories not so traditional. For example, the idea of critical historiography, where you sort of look at different methodologies as this witness seminar, for example, where you think of like more transdisciplinary research, where everybody can become potentially a researcher that sits around a table and discuss historical events and how you felt when you were part of that, and so on and so on. And I think that really sort of expands this notion of participation in the end. And then, of course, it's the question, how is this taken care of afterwards? Who is conducting them, who is developing.
But I think this is what's really interesting about your project, Action Archive. It's a completely different kind of participatory work than I've done, participatory design, which does these maybe, live, real-time actions and so on. But this is conducted, as you say, with a strong-rooted historiography perspective, but also bringing in different people and telling different stories and choreographing a situation which is not only about a participation incident that happened in the past, but about understanding how that's now, the knowledge of that is created or recreated or reconstructed in a participatory way today. So the content, as well as perhaps the setting, is very different than another kind of participation in material, you could say, or So that's what I think. This word participation, when you localize it in a historiographic practice, you learn something new somehow. And then you could think of what a participatory archiving would be. I mean, to some extent, in the design act, we tried to open our network to suggest projects which maybe we would have never heard of. In a typical exhibition like a biennial, you work in a networked way, and there's blind spots in everyone's network. We still struggle to get projects from certain parts of the world, but still we really tried. We made an effort to open up and have a participatory collection of things at the archive. I don't know. So I mean, you're right. When you add the word critical and you add the word participatory onto historiography, you get something really interesting.
So in terms,
sorry,
No, actually, it's also related to our discussions from yesterday.
Yeah.
Because if you change language,
Yeah.
you will have a new thing.
Exactly.
If you are talking still the old language,
Yeah.
all the old words,
Yeah.
the old setups, then
You come
then,
into the same.
you come into the same situation again. But if you change language,
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. Now can I ask you about architecture for all? Because you mentioned when we talked about utopias
Yeah.
and utopic moments,
Yeah.
you mentioned Gezi Park, and I guess architecture for all started in some conditions,
Mhm.
but also went through some transformations. I guess also around a totally different sense of reality and perhaps even rights or perhaps even subjectivity. You could say politicization after Gezi Park. I don't know.
the thing is, the relation of the association with the Gezi Park has started one
before-
year.
one year
yeah.
before the Gezi protest.
Exactly. So
Yes.
you had a kind of
Yeah.
before and after.
Yeah.
Of that.
At that time, I was like, I wasn't supporting to do anything to, or I don't. At that time, I didn't believe that any kind of action might change anything in this political and
Okay.
cultural economic situation of Turkey. But the members of the association, they just
optimists.
they were I'm always pessimist more than optimist. So there were our friends who just wanted to not create some kind of big thing, but they just wanted to organize an event
Yeah,
to
actually, it's
to create some kind of usage in the park, because everybody
it's
is
also a counterattack to the traditional protest and traditional things, because we were as a part of the Taksim platform, the huge platform, all the NGOs, all the Chamber of Architects, those civic initiatives were there.
At that moment, there was this huge, not NGO, all of them are not NGOs, but there were voluntary, voluntary people, who just, in a way, connected through these meetings or, through internet and any kind of. So actually, there was this huge group of people who are discussing this, because the municipality and the prime minister at that time, they just announced the projects about Taksim and Gezi Park. And to create that kind of discussion, people just come together, not physically, but not with only meetings, but also through the internet, etc. 1.5 years before.
So architecture was sparked by the announcement of those projects in some way, or
not the association, but the project. The so-called traditional Gezi Park festivals has started with that.
Yeah, of course.
So also, it's a time we just founded. We founded it in November of 2011.
Yeah.
And in 2011, in December, the Prime Minister Erdogan and the Erdogan announced the project.
Yeah.
Then we started to discuss each other, because we're really young NGO and we don't know how to produce as a traditional activist, and that's why we should make something creative.
Okay.
And then we made a workshop. We made open call, and the workshop gave these traditional Gezi Park picnic festivals. And they were just about to show people the park is not useless. We are going to use the park. It's not abandoned.
It's to come there to enjoy the park itself. Was this positive, in a way passive declaration of some kind of anti-declaration to the projects in a way. So it was like people just coming there, enjoying, playing music, eating and drinking, etc. At the same time, some members of the association made these reportages and interviews in the park, and for me it was like an exploration of new user types. Actually, we were the new ones, because we were the ones who are not using the park.
We just realized when we were in the park, we realized oh, come on, people are using this park, we don't
Yeah.
know.
There are
So
people.
you also felt as occupiers. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, there were people actually using the park because, you know, we took, you know, in this, you know, media or the announcement, during the announcement of the project, it's always said that you know, this park is criminalized, you know, abundant, there is no people, no one is using it. So rather than having that kind of space, why not to regulate it with this shopping mall and this new ideas of pedestrianization and this and that. But when we are there, you know, the people who are actually there are not our friends, or you know, who are not who are the ones who didn't come for picnic or this, you know, traditional guest park event. Actually, there were people who brought their children to there, and you know, with these interviews, you can, you know, witness that, you know, they said that, okay, we are coming here for like, you know, since 5 years, constantly every weekend, if the weather is good, because there's no other green space around in here.
Here's the only space we
Here's
can
the
rent.
only, you know, and they say that, you know, this is the only space that we can come and spend time without paying for
Okay.
something,
I
or
see.
you know, this kind of things. But and there are the regular people who are living in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So this was also a realization. And then how many times this event had been organized? 10 times, and nothing changed because, you know, actually there were maximum maybe 100 people for each event, and it didn't change anything. And then, you know, maybe more than yeah, a couple of them more than that. You know, much more PR with social media, etc., for sure. But then the association stopped to do it because the situation changed. You know, there were other discussions about the projects and announcements, etc.
But then we made another project about the park.
Yeah.
For the first Istanbul Design Biennial.
Okay.
We used as a tool, we used the strategy of mockumentary.
Okay.
We made a fake newspaper, we made a fake TV interview with
Yeah.
the mayor of, no,
Fake mayor.
fake mayor of Beyoğlu municipality,
Yeah.
and he was telling they are doing this park project with the scientific committee, with the participation, and they made on a website.
Yeah, so it is like an imaginary projection of now, rather than having this, you know, highly entrepreneur motivational thing. How could it be possible to create another kind of reality which uses, you know, participatory method, participation, and you know, some kind of different reality, and then it was there, and then.
And then we made open source graphics.
Yeah.
We put online. We started a petition.
Yeah.
But nothing changed.
Yeah, nothing changed.
Nothing changed.
And
So that was the biennial project, but nothing really shifted after that. Yeah.
after that, nothing really shifted, and you know, time just passed, etc., etc. And you know,
And the miracle happened.
yeah, the miracle was actually the real action, or you know, demolition, which, you know, in a way, just jump into the park, because actually there were not demolishing the park, but you know, because of lack of processes during the you know, during the design process of the pedestrianization project, they forget to leave space for sidewalk.
Yeah.
So they had to demolish a part of the park to create some more additional space. And when the municipality started that construction, that triggered, you know, lots of people, you know, and lots of attention, and they came to the park, and the attitude of the police and you know, people from the government actually triggered much more reaction from the people, and then the event started. So anyhow, actually,
I would like to add lastly on this topic, because I think it's also another important point. The architecture for all, the position of the architecture for all in this situation is like, not like we are not against the all the park restoration, or you know, we're always in the middle. Even our petition declaration is like, we know if the park needs some restoration, but it should be transparent. It should be with participants. It should be with all actors from the city. Because,
Another way
because, you
is
know, this-
possible.
yeah, another way is
Set
possible.
the association.
We don't say no, we don't say yes.
Yeah.
We just say, just open the platform to discuss.
Because, you know, if you trap yourself in this dual decision,
Mhm.
then it is like an endless discussion. Because, you know, the processes itself are like, you know, the problematic thing, not the decision of, you know, not to decide one thing or another. You know, the question is totally different because the process is itself
Of
a
course.
problematic thing. So, you
And
know,
then you don't necessarily get to the same end. Of course, the means affects the end.
of course,
Yeah.
of course, because, you know, everybody, you know, there were some, let's say, you know, regular attitudes of architects. For example, they said that, okay, this project is not good. I bring my own project. They said, they thought that, you know, any kind of different project might be much more better to the area. They thought that, you know, this, you know, design, their creative, holy ideas of design, you know, will be much more better for the site. But the design is not the problem. Actually, the process was the problem.
Okay.
We need to talk something else.
Yeah.
Of the process.
So, and, you know, for me, at least as an architect, it was like a, you know, exploration process for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Of, you know, my approach to the discipline, how I understand the processes, and, you know, during that period, I guess lots of people who have a critical view about the events learned lots of stuff because, you know, we experienced, for example, meetings with you know, people from the local government or from the government, and, you know, we met with architects which have different types, different approaches to the problem, etc.
This was super anyway.
Yeah, at this time.
Yeah.
Just talk.
Yeah, we are online.
Yeah, we're, you know, so
Yeah.
it was a great discussion.
Indeed.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I thought, you know, I really like the, I don't know, you know, I really like the range of discussion that we have been through.
Mm.
So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you
and
for
being
inviting us.
And you'll tell us when you're in Sweden.
Yeah.
Super.
Okay.
And we hope to be back and sort of follow your work and what's happening here. And
Yeah.
again, the publication and the exhibition, we will
And
keep
the
in touch.
website.
Utopia now here. Yeah.
Yeah. it's
Super.
great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
And you'll let us know about this documentation as well. We'll spread it amongst
course.
our colleagues and our students
Of
and our.
course. Great.
Hmm?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So what's